The moment I heard my daughter's oxygen alarm go silent, my world stopped. I sprinted across the yard, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. And there she was, my fragile little girl, gasping for air, her tiny fingers shaking as she tried to reach for her tank. And standing right beside her was HOA Karen, arms crossed, smirking, like she had done something heroic. She was too loud, she said, as if turning off a disabled child's oxygen supply was some minor inconvenience. My daughter's lips were turning blue. Seconds mattered. My vision blurred with rage and panic as I shoved past Karen and fumbled to turn the valve back on, my hands trembling uncontrollably. But the moment the oxygen rushed back into my daughter's lungs and she took that first desperate breath, I realized something horrifying. Karen didn't do this by accident. She meant it. Before this story begins, I want to talk directly to every single one of you watching right now. I appreciate you, truly. And right this moment, I want to know something from you. Which city are you watching this from? Drop your city name below in the comments because our community reaches further than even I imagined. And every time I see people from New York, Dallas, Chicago, Miami, Phoenix, Atlanta, Houston, LA, Seattle, and even small hometowns I've never heard of, it reminds me why I keep sharing these stories. Now listen, before the story starts, just make sure you hit that subscribe button because stories like this one, stories about injustice, about ordinary parents fighting impossible battles, these need to be heard. What happened to my daughter that day wasn't just wrong, it was evil, cruel, unnecessary. And the fact that it came from a grown woman who lived only a few houses away makes the whole situation even more terrifying. My daughter is 9 years old. She has a respiratory condition that requires her to stay connected to a portable oxygen tank at all times. It's her lifeline. It's the reason she can laugh, play, breathe, and live somewhat normally. But the idea that anyone, especially a neighbor I once trusted, would intentionally interfere with her oxygen supply just because she thought my daughter was too loud still makes my skin crawl. What happened after that moment didn't just shock the neighborhood. It changed our lives forever. And it changed hers too. Because sometimes the moment someone crosses a line that dark, there's no coming back. Now that you're here, let's begin. The moment the oxygen alarm beeped its final desperate warning, I didn't think, I ran. My feet barely touched the ground as I tore across the yard toward the sound, my chest tight, my throat burning, every worst-case scenario pounding in my skull like a war drum. My daughter, my sweet 9-year-old, who had already fought more battles than most adults do in a lifetime, was sitting on the grass outside our porch, her face pale, her eyes wide with terror, her tiny hands clutching her chest as she struggled to breathe. The oxygen tube lay useless at her side. I dropped to my knees so fast it scraped them raw, fumbling with the valve, my fingers shaking so violently I could hardly grip anything. And then I saw it. The tank wasn't malfunctioning. It wasn't leaking. Someone had turned it off. Intentionally. I followed the line of the valve, my mind spinning, and there she stood, HOA Karen, arms folded across her chest, chin lifted high, like she was the queen of the neighborhood, her expression twisted with that signature blend of arrogance and false righteousness she carried like perfume. She was being too loud, she said, rolling her eyes as if she were the victim in this story. Too loud? My daughter wasn't screaming. She wasn't shouting. She had only been laughing. Laughing. A sound I prayed for every day, because it reminded me that she was still here, still fighting, still surviving despite everything her lungs had taken from her. And yet Karen, with her spotless porch, her rule book thicker than the Bible, and her obsession with controlling every inch of the neighborhood, had decided that my daughter's laughter was an inconvenience worth choking her over. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shove her so far off my property she'd forget she ever existed. But I couldn't think about Karen, not when my daughter's breaths were shallow and fading. My hands shook as I twisted the valve open again, the hiss of oxygen filling the tube, becoming the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. My daughter gasped, her lungs catching the first deep breath like her body had been underwater and was finally breaking the surface. Tears streamed down her face as she leaned forward into me, desperate, trembling, clinging to my shirt like she was scared she might float away if she let go. I wrapped my arms around her, whispering, "It's okay, baby. I've got you. Breathe. Just breathe." Her breath steadied slowly, painfully, each inhale stronger than the last. Only when her color began to return did I turn my attention back to the woman standing behind us, the woman who could have killed my child and didn't seem to care. "You turned off her tank?" I asked, my voice so strained I barely recognized it as my own. "Are you insane?" Karen scoffed, flicking a piece of imaginary dust off her sleeve. "Don't be dramatic." She was making a racket. I couldn't even hear myself think. "She's 9. I shouted. "She needs this tank to live." Karen shrugged, completely unmoved. "Well, maybe she shouldn't play outside if she's so fragile." The word fragile hit me like a punch. She said it as if my daughter's disability was a burden to her personally, as if my daughter wasn't allowed to exist within earshot of her perfect little world. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. The old me, the calm, polite, don't make a scene me, wanted to walk away, wanted to focus only on my daughter's safety, wanted to pretend this was just a misunderstanding I could resolve with logic. But this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't an accident. This was cruelty. Intentional cruelty. "Karen," I said, standing slowly, still shielding my daughter with my body, "if you ever come near her tank again—" "Oh, please," she snapped, stepping closer, her voice rising with that familiar HOA superiority. "You think you can threaten me? I know the rules better than you, and children aren't supposed to be making noise during quiet hours. I warned you before. I told you her laughing was disturbing the neighborhood peace. It wasn't quiet hours. It wasn't even close. It was 4:40 p.m. on a weekday, and kids from 3 houses down were bouncing basketballs, screaming in excitement, riding bikes, chasing each other. But no, Karen didn't care about them. She cared only about my daughter, my sick daughter, my vulnerable daughter. Because in Karen's world, power was everything. Control was everything. And the fact that she didn't have any control over my daughter's disability made her furious. "You could have killed her," I said quietly, too quietly, because that was when my daughter, still holding on to me, still breathing hard, lifted her head and whispered through trembling breaths, "Daddy," she said she'd do it again. My heart froze. "What?" she told me. "If you don't stop that noise, I'll shut it off again." Every drop of blood in my body turned molten. I stepped forward, closing the distance between me and Karen until she finally stepped back. For the first time, she looked nervous. "You threatened her?" I asked. "You threatened my sick child?" "I warned her," Karen snapped. "Because you clearly don't know how to control her." "She's sick," I said, voice breaking. "She's fighting to live every single day." "Not my problem," she said flatly. And that's when something in me cracked. Not rage, not aggression. Something deeper, colder, sharper. A promise forming in the quiet. I lifted my phone. Karen froze. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Documenting," I said. "Everything." Her eyes widened for half a second before she puffed out her chest again. "You can't do anything. I'm on the board." "And I'm a father," I replied. "And you messed with the wrong child today." And she didn't even know yet how far this was about to go. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a second. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my daughter gasping for breath, her tiny fingers clawing at her chest, while Karen stood there like she'd done nothing wrong. I sat beside my daughter's bed, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest, listening to the steady hum of her oxygen concentrator, and promising myself I would never, ever let anyone harm her again, no matter who they were or what power they thought they had. But the tremble in my hands wouldn't stop. The anger inside me wouldn't settle. It crawled and pulsed under my skin like fire. At sunrise, I stepped outside, still exhausted, still furious, and found something that only made everything worse. A bright pink HOA violation slip-taped my door. The words "noise disturbance, final warning" stared back at me like a slap. Final warning? For my daughter laughing? For being alive? My chest tightened with disbelief as I looked around the neighborhood. Karen's blinds shifted. She was watching. She always watched. And in that moment, I knew she wanted a reaction. She wanted me to lose control so she could twist it into something against me and my daughter. She wanted power. But what she didn't know was that I had already begun preparing my own steps, my own defense, my own truth. With the violation slip still in my hand, I walked back inside, grabbed my phone, and replayed the recording I'd captured yesterday. The moment my daughter told me Karen threatened her, the moment Karen admitted she warned her, I listened to it again and again, each time feeling my jaw clench harder. Then I sent copies of the recording to myself, to my laptop, to my cloud storage, anywhere it would be safe. Because deep down, I sensed this situation wasn't going to get better. It was going to explode, and I needed proof. Hours passed. My daughter rested, her breathing steadier now, though the fear still lingered in her eyes. She kept glancing toward the window, like she expected Karen to show up again and twist off her oxygen valve. That broke me. No child should ever fear their neighbor like that. Around noon, I heard footsteps approaching our porch. Slow, heavy, deliberate. I looked through the peephole and felt a surge of frustration, so strong it nearly knocked the breath out of me. Karen. Of course. She stood with a small clipboard in hand and that stupid, smug superiority glued across her face. I opened the door, just enough to stand in the frame, blocking her view of the inside. You can't retaliate against me, she said immediately, like she'd rehearsed the line. Board members are protected when enforcing rules. That word, rules, felt like poison in my ears. And disabled children aren't? I shot back, my voice low and cold. For the first time, a thin crack of annoyance flickered across her expression. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to tell you that your daughter's behavior will not be tolerated. Her behavior? I repeated, stunned. She was laughing Karen. She waved her hand dismissively. The neighborhood has standards. She disrupts the peace. And frankly, if she's that delicate, perhaps you should keep her indoors where she can't be a nuisance. A nuisance. My daughter, a child who fought every day for air, was a nuisance to this woman. Karen, step away from my door, I warned quietly. You've done enough. Oh, I'm not done, she said, voice rising with excitement like she enjoyed this chaos. I'm filing a formal complaint. And once the board votes, you will face consequences. You think being emotional will save you? It won't. I stared at her, my blood boiling, and then I saw something behind her that made my stomach twist. Two of our neighbors, watching from their driveways, whispering to each other. Karen turned her head slightly, smirking when she saw them. She wanted an audience. She wanted witnesses for her version of the truth. Karen, I said again, controlling the storm inside my chest, you turned off my daughter's oxygen tank. You put her health at risk. That's not just a rule violation. That's a crime. Instead of denying it, like any normal person would, her lips curved into a cold smile. Prove it, she said simply, and that was the moment everything clicked. She didn't think I had proof. She didn't think anyone would believe me over her. She didn't think anyone cared enough about a little girl with an oxygen tank. And for a second, I almost felt sorry for her, because she underestimated the wrong parent. I held up my phone. Karen's eyes widened. I recorded everything. Her face drained of color so fast it was almost satisfying. You what? Every word I said, every threat. The neighbors watching suddenly stopped whispering. They stepped closer. Karen's mask started to crack. You can't. That's illegal. You can't record me without permission. I didn't blink. This is a single-party consent state, I said, and you consented the second you opened your mouth and threatened my daughter. She stumbled back a step, her eyes darting around like she was suddenly trying to calculate the consequences. Delete it, she hissed. Now. Not a chance, I replied. Her jaw tightened. Her nostrils flared. She was used to control, to people folding under her voice, under her pretend authority. But for the first time, she was powerless. This will ruin you, she whispered. No, I said. This will expose you. She stood there for several seconds, trembling with rage, before she violently spun around and stormed off, nearly tripping over her own feet. I watched her go, holding the phone tighter in my hand. I didn't know what she would do next. But I knew this wasn't over. Because people like Karen never walked away, quietly. They came back louder. And worse. And I had a feeling her next move would push everything beyond the point of return. The fallout began faster than I expected. By the next morning, the neighborhood wasn't just whispering, they were splitting into sides. Some parents avoided eye contact with me, pretending they didn't see the oxygen tank strapped to my daughter's little backpack as she sat on the porch coloring quietly, afraid to step onto the grass because Karen had glared at her through the blinds. Others approached cautiously, offering small apologies, short glances of sympathy, or vague phrases like, "I heard something happened," but none brave enough to openly confront Karen. Cowardice disguised as neutrality. And yet, rumors were spreading anyway. I overheard one neighbor telling another, Karen said the girl was causing disturbances again. She claims the father is exaggerating to get sympathy. Sympathy? My hands clenched so hard my nails dug into my palms. Sympathy was the last thing I wanted. What I wanted was accountability. But Karen worked fast. She always had. By noon, flyers appeared on street posts along our cul-de-sac, HOA-branded flyers accusing my home of multiple noise violations, disruptive behavior, and refusal to maintain neighborhood peace. She had printed them, distributed them, weaponized them, all within hours. My stomach twisted when I saw them, because this wasn't just petty HOA nonsense anymore. This was a targeted attack, a smear campaign, an attempt to paint me as unstable before the truth could spread. And worse, it was working. I could see it in the way some neighbors looked at me, cautious, judgmental, unsure. But there was one neighbor whose reaction caught me off guard, Mr. Jensen, an older widower who lived 2 houses down. He approached me quietly as I tore down one of Karen's flyers. "Son," he said, voice low, "I know what she's doing. She did the same thing to the Harris family years ago, ruined their reputation until they moved away." "Over what?" I asked. "A swing set she didn't like," he replied. I froze. "You're telling me she chased a whole family out over a swing set?" He nodded. "Karen doesn't stop until she wins. Or until someone stops her." Those words hit me like a warning bell, because I'd already seen what she was capable of. That evening, I found my daughter sitting by her bedroom window, staring out with a frightened expression. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" I asked gently. She hesitated before whispering, "Dad, she was outside again." My chest tightened. "Where?" "Near the porch." She looked at my tank again. A cold, electric fury ran through me. I stepped outside immediately, but Karen's yard was empty. Only her curtains moved slightly, like someone had just let go of them. She was watching us again, stalking my daughter like some twisted predator. The next day, things escalated even further. When I opened the mailbox, an official-looking envelope sat inside with the HOA seal stamped across the top. My heart dropped. Inside was a letter threatening fines, disciplinary action, and mandatory attendance at a behavior correction meeting for violating noise ordinances. They gave me 48 hours to comply. 48 hours before they would take further action. Karen had moved the entire board against us. She knew how to manipulate them. She knew how to twist stories. She knew how to frame herself as the savior of a neighborhood, while painting my sick daughter as a disturbance. I wasn't letting this stand. I grabbed my phone, opened the recording I took, and sent it to the HOA's official email address, along with a detailed report of exactly what happened. Then I CC'd every board member, every neighbor's public directory email, and even the community Facebook group. I wasn't holding back. The truth needed to be seen. Within minutes, notifications exploded across the neighborhood. People were viewing it, commenting, sharing. And Karen, well, her reaction came quickly. She stormed down the sidewalk toward my house, her face red, with fury, shouting before she even stepped onto my property. "How dare you?" she shrieked. "You broke privacy laws. You manipulated the audio. You are harassing me." I stepped outside, calm, collected, but internally burning with a storm I'd held back for far too long. "The audio speaks for itself," I said. "You threatened a child." "That little brat," she spat before catching herself, realizing neighbors were watching. Gasps erupted from the small crowd forming on the sidewalk. You heard that, I told them. She almost killed my daughter. Karen's eyes darted wildly. No. I was just trying to enforce the rules. He's lying. I didn't mean, but her voice broke. Her confidence shattered. For the first time, she didn't have control. A few neighbors murmured angrily. Others glared at her. Some started recording her meltdown on their phones. She noticed and snapped completely. Stop recording me. You can't record me, she screamed, rushing toward someone holding their phone. But the more she yelled, the more people recorded. She looked around, realizing she couldn't control the narrative anymore. She was now the one being watched, exposed, judged. But the scariest moment came when she turned to me, her voice lowering into something venomous, chilling, and dangerous. This isn't over, she whispered. You think an audio clip will save you? I will make sure your daughter is removed from this neighborhood. My blood froze. What did you just say? You heard me, she hissed. She doesn't belong here. She's the hazard. And people like you shouldn't raise children with medical risks in communities like ours. I will handle this my way. And then she walked off, fast, unhinged, and terrifyingly determined. The neighbors left slowly, whispering among themselves. Some rushed to message the board. Others posted online. People were finally seeing her for who she truly was, but I knew that look in her eyes. I'd seen it before, on people who believed they were invincible. People who didn't stop until something broke. She wasn't done. She wasn't backing down. She was planning something bigger, something worse. And deep in my chest, a cold dread formed. Because for the first time, I realized Karen wasn't just hateful, she was dangerous. And the next attack wouldn't be verbal. It would be something far darker. The next 48 hours felt like living inside a storm I couldn't escape. Every time I stepped outside, I felt eyes watching from behind curtains, some worried for us, some curious, and some clearly waiting for more drama. But I knew the only gaze that truly mattered was Karen's, because she wasn't just watching, she was plotting. I felt it in the shift of the neighborhood's atmosphere, in the way her porch lights stayed on late into the night, in the way her blinds twitched whenever my daughter stepped outside for a moment of air. I barely slept, pacing the hallway, checking my daughter's oxygen concentrator every hour, terrified that Karen might try something again, something bigger, something irreversible. And for the first time since moving here, I made sure every window was locked, every camera charged, every porch sensor active. People thought Karen was just a nosy, overbearing HOA tyrant. But I'd seen the look in her eyes when she threatened to get my daughter removed. That wasn't HOA annoyance. That was obsession. Dangerous obsession. So, the next morning, when I heard a knock at my door, a calm, official knock, I braced myself for whatever new disaster she had stirred up. I opened the door to find 2 community officers standing on my porch. My heart dropped, not because I had done anything wrong, but because I recognized the pattern. Karen wasn't going to fight me openly. She was going to weaponize the system against me. Sir, the first officer said politely, we received a call from a member of this neighborhood about a concern for your daughter's well-being. I felt my jaw tense. There it was. May we come in? The second officer asked. I stepped aside, keeping my voice steady. Of course. My daughter was sitting on the living room sofa, drawing quietly with her oxygen tank humming gently beside her. She looked up at the officers with wide, innocent eyes. Hi, she whispered. The officers softened immediately. Hey, there, sweetheart, one said, crouching down. We just want to make sure you're okay. She nodded, clutching her drawing. I'm okay. Daddy fixed my tank. My stomach clenched. The officer looked at me. Fixed, he repeated carefully. I nodded. My neighbor interfered with it. The officers exchanged a look, one of disbelief but not dismissal. The caller, the second officer said, glancing at his notes, reported that your daughter might be living in unsafe medical conditions, possibly due to parental negligence. Negligence. The word burned through me like acid. Karen had crossed the line again, but this time she crossed it with a motive, to paint me as an unfit parent, to take away the one thing she could never control, my daughter's existence in this neighborhood. I steadied my breath. Officers, please listen carefully. I walked to my phone, opened the recording, and played the part where Karen admitted turning off the oxygen tank and threatening to do it again. Their jaws tightened instantly. She turned it off, one officer said, angrily. Intentionally? Yes, I said, and she filed a false report against me to cover her tracks. They exchanged another look, but this one wasn't disbelief. It was anger directed at the real threat, Karen. After asking a few more questions and confirming my daughter's tank and medical equipment were in proper working order, the officers apologized and left, promising to file an official report on the false complaint. But even after the door closed, I felt no relief. Because I knew Karen wouldn't accept defeat. And I was right. That afternoon, I caught her outside talking to 3 neighbors, loudly, dramatically sweeping her hands around as she told some twisted version of events. One neighbor looked shocked, another confused, but a third nodded. And that terrified me. Lies spread faster than truth. And Karen wasn't just spreading them, she was planting seeds, big ones, seeds designed to grow into chaos. Later that evening, a board notice appeared in my inbox. An emergency HOA meeting would be held to discuss escalating neighborhood disruptions and concerns involving Lot 14, my home. Karen had done it. She dragged the entire board into this to force a vote against me. My hands shook as I read the message. I needed to prepare. So I gathered everything, printouts, transcripts, recordings, photos. I organized them into a binder with tabs and timestamps. I wasn't walking into that meeting blindly, and even though I had proof, I also knew proof alone wouldn't stop someone as manipulative as her. At 7 p.m., the meeting began in the community hall. I walked in holding my thick binder, my daughter safe at home with a trusted neighbor watching her. The room went silent as soon as I stepped inside. The board members sat at the front, 6 of them, including Karen, who sat smugly at the center, chin lifted like she'd already won. Neighbors filled the rows of chairs, whispering, watching. Karen stood immediately. Before we begin, she announced, I want to state that the father of Lot 14 has become a disturbance to the community. He has harassed me, illegally recorded me, and endangered his disabled daughter by failing to supervise her properly. A murmur spread through the room. I stepped forward slowly, calmly. Karen smiled triumphantly. You see, she said loudly. He can't even deny it. I took a deep breath. I don't need to deny anything, I said, because I have proof. The room quieted instantly. I opened the binder, took out the printed transcript, and held up my phone. Play it, a board member said. So I did. The audio echoed through the hall. Karen's voice admitting she turned off the tank, Karen calling my daughter too loud, Karen threatening to do it again. When it finished, you could have heard a pin drop. Karen's face drained of color. That was taken out of context, she shrieked. He manipulated it. We can analyze the file, a board member said sharply. It sounds real. A neighbor stood up angrily. You threatened a child, Karen. A disabled child. Another neighbor shouted, Is this true? You turned off her tank. Karen panicked. No. He's twisting everything. She was disturbing the neighborhood. Someone in the back yelled. She was laughing. Karen's voice cracked. This is a witch hunt. No, a board member said sternly. This is accountability. Karen slammed her hand down on the table. You're all fools. You don't know what that child is capable of. The entire room gasped, and just like that, Karen exposed herself. Not as a concerned board member. Not as a neighborhood enforcer, but as someone who held hatred toward a child who couldn't even defend herself. The board exchanged looks, serious, disgusted, done with her. Karen, the head member said, step down. Effective immediately. You're removed from the HOA board pending investigation. Karen staggered back, trembling with rage, humiliation, and something darker. You can't do this, she whispered. I built this neighborhood. I kept order. This meeting is adjourned, the head member said firmly. Everyone stood. Everyone watched. But Karen didn't move. Not until she turned to me slowly, her eyes full of something cold and dangerous. "You think this is over?" she murmured. "You have no idea what you've started." She walked out, not defeated, but planning. And as I stood there, clutching the binder, I realized the truth. Exposing her wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something far more terrifying. The night after the HOA meeting was the first time I felt a tiny flicker of relief, brief, fragile, and gone almost as soon as it appeared. Karen had been removed from the board, exposed publicly, humiliated in front of the very people she tried to control. But I knew her too well by now. Karen didn't crumble quietly. She waited. She recalculated. She retaliated. So, I wasn't surprised when I found her porch lights blazing past midnight, her windows cracked open, just enough for her to listen, watch, and monitor the world she felt slipping out of her hands. I double-checked every lock in my house, tested every camera angle twice, and made sure my daughter slept with her oxygen concentrator right beside her bed, humming softly like a guardian. Even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something bigger than noise complaints and printed flyers, something personal. Around 3 a.m., the motion alert on my porch camera chimed softly on my phone. My heart kicked into my throat. I opened the feed and felt my stomach, not instantly. Karen was standing on the walkway between our houses, half hidden in the shadows, staring straight toward my daughter's bedroom window. She wasn't moving. She wasn't talking. She was just staring, watching, planning. I stepped outside immediately. "Karen," I said sharply, standing on my porch where the light illuminated me. "Go home." She didn't flinch, didn't blink. Finally, she tilted her head slightly, her voice low and chilling. "You think exposing me makes you safe?" I stood still, but every instinct in me surged forward. "Stay away from my daughter." She smiled, not wide, not dramatic, but small, calm, terrifying. "I don't need the board anymore," she whispered. "There are other ways to get rid of problems." My fists tightened. "If you take one more step toward my house, I'm calling the police." She stepped back, but not out of fear, because she wanted me to see that she wasn't scared, that she still felt in control. "You can try to protect her," she murmured, "but accidents happen." And then she turned and slipped back toward her yard like a shadow. I watched her door slam shut, the porch light shutting off instantly, like she vanished into darkness. The next morning, I contacted the police and filed a formal harassment report. I gave them the porch footage, timestamps, everything. They warned her. They told her to stay away from us. But warnings meant nothing to someone like Karen. Because later that afternoon, I caught her talking to a young man in a cheap work vest near the end of the street. A man I'd never seen before. He looked around nervously while she pointed toward my house. When their eyes met mine, the man walked away quickly and Karen disappeared inside again. Something in my gut twisted violently. She was planning something, and she wasn't doing it alone. That evening, while my daughter was sitting on the porch drawing quietly, I noticed a strange truck parked 2 houses down. No company logo, no license plates visible, windows heavily tinted. My pulse spiked. I picked up my daughter and brought her inside immediately. She looked up at me with those fragile, trusting eyes. "Daddy, did I do something wrong?" The innocence in her voice shattered something inside me. "No, sweetheart," I said, hugging her tightly. "You didn't do anything wrong. Daddy's just being careful." But careful wasn't enough. I began calling the community board, explaining that Karen was continuing her harassment even after being removed, but they brushed me off, insisting it was a personal matter now. Personal matter? She had threatened my daughter's life. Twice. That night, I stayed awake again, watching the cameras, pacing the hallway. At around 11:20 p.m., motion alert again, this time near the side of my house. My throat tightened as I pulled up the feed. A figure crouched beside the oxygen concentrator unit outside, the backup system connected to the main line my daughter used during the day. The figure reached for the valve. My blood turned to fire. I bolted out the front door, phone recording in my hand. "Hey!" I yelled so loud the entire street must have heard. The figure jerked up and sprinted away. I chased him halfway down the street, before he jumped into the same unmarked truck I'd seen earlier. The engine roared, and they sped off into the night. A porch light flicked on. Then another. Neighbor stepped outside, confused, alarmed. Karen's porch light stayed off, but I knew she was watching through those blinds. I ran back to the unit and checked the valve. It had been tampered with, loosened, seconds away from shutting off completely. My knees nearly buckled. They weren't just harassing us anymore. They were trying to hurt my daughter, maybe kill her. The next morning, I marched straight to the police station with the footage from the attempt to sabotage the oxygen system from Karen stalking at 3 a.m., from every single moment she crossed the line. The officers took it seriously now. They opened an investigation. They asked if I had any idea who the man in the vest was. I didn't, but I had a very good idea of who sent him. On the drive home, dread seeped deeper into my bones. Because if Karen was willing to hire someone willing to sneak around houses at night and tamper with medical equipment, then what was she planning next? When I pulled into the driveway, I saw my daughter sitting in the window, smiling, waving at me with the innocence only a child could ever have. She had no idea how close she came. Again, I walked into the house, hugged her tightly, felt her small arms wrap around my neck, and made a silent vow inside my heart. Whatever Karen was planning next, whatever twisted retaliation she believed she had the right to unleash, I would be ready. And this time, I wouldn't wait for her to strike first. Because I could feel it in the air, like the quiet before a storm. Karen wasn't finished, not even close. And the next move would be the one that changed everything forever. The following days felt like a tightening noose, quiet, tense, suffocating, because Karen had suddenly gone silent. No porch lights flickering at odd hours, no blinds twitching, no yelling across the yard, no threats whispered under a breath. And that silence scared me far more than anything she'd ever shouted. People like Karen didn't disappear. They waited. They planned. They struck when your guard dropped just enough for them to slip through the cracks. So I didn't let my guard drop. For a second, I kept my daughter indoors as much as possible, installed additional cameras around the oxygen systems, reinforced the side gate lock, and even slept on the couch closest to the hallway, so I could reach her room in seconds if anything happened. But even with all those precautions, even with every instinct in me screaming that something was coming, I still wasn't prepared for how far Karen was willing to go. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, bright and sunny, the kind of day when kids ride their bikes and neighbors mow their lawns. My daughter asked if she could sit on the porch steps with her coloring book. After days of keeping her inside, I finally agreed, but only if I sat with her. She smiled, wrapped in her small pink blanket, oxygen tank humming steadily beside her. For a moment, it felt peaceful. For a moment, I almost forgot the danger lurking nearby. Then I heard it, the sound of an engine revving aggressively. A car turned into our street, speeding far too fast for a residential neighborhood. My heart jumped. Inside, I said lowly, lifting my daughter immediately. She clung to me, confused but trusting. The car slowed as it approached our home, windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. It rolled to a stop directly in front of our driveway. My pulse thundered. I stepped backward toward the door, shielding my daughter with my body. For several long, agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Then the driver's side door opened, and out stepped Karen, not dressed in her usual pressed button-downs and HOA badge lanyard. No, she looked unhinged. Hair messy, eyes wild, breathing heavy like she'd been shouting or crying or both. She slammed her door shut and marched toward our yard with erratic, jerking steps. "Give her to me!" Karen screamed, so loudly the sound cracked. My daughter whimpered, burying her face in my shoulder. "Karen, stay back," I warned, stepping inside the doorway. "You need help." "You are the problem," she shrieked, pointing at me with trembling hands. "You turned them all against me. You made me look crazy. You ruined everything." Neighbors started coming out onto their porches again. Phones lifted. Cameras pointed. But Karen didn't care anymore. She crossed the lawn, stepping onto my property. She's sick because of you, she screeched. She's a disturbance. A danger. The neighborhood isn't safe with her here. My jaw clenched. Karen, you're scaring my daughter. Good. Karen screamed. Maybe fear will keep her quiet. Something inside me broke. I placed my daughter inside the doorway and told her, Sweetheart, go to your room and lock the door. She hesitated, frightened but obeyed. Karen lunged toward the house. I stepped in her path. You're not going near her, I said. Not now. Not ever. Her eyes narrowed with a terrifying intensity, and before I could react, she reached behind her back and pulled out a wrench. A metal wrench. The kind used for valves. She raised it like she was about to swing. Neighbors screamed. Someone yelled to call 911. Everything froze. My heart, my breath, the entire street. And then instinct took over. I grabbed her wrist, twisted it away from my direction, and the wrench clattered onto the ground. She screamed like a wounded animal, thrashing wildly, her nails scraping across my arm. I held her away, but even then she lunged again, trying to grab the oxygen tank through the doorway. Stop trying to kill my daughter. I roared, those words echoing through the street. Finally snapped something in the bystanders. 2 neighbors ran forward. Another dialed the police. And Karen finally realized she had lost. Truly, completely, undeniably lost. She stumbled backward, panting, shaking with rage and humiliation, her eyes darting wildly like she was searching for someone to blame besides herself. This isn't my fault, she hissed, pointing at me with trembling hands. You ruined me. You ruined me. You did this to yourself, I said, exhausted, shaking done. Sirens wailed in the distance. Karen's head snapped toward the sound. Panic spread across her face. Not guilt, not remorse. Panic at losing control. She turned and tried to run to her car, but 2 officers arrived at that exact second, blocking her path. They tackled her near the sidewalk as she screamed and fought, spitting insults, kicking, clawing, shouting that the neighborhood will fall without me, and that sick little girl is the problem, and this place was better before she arrived. Every word she screamed dug deeper into the truth. Not my truth, not my daughter's truth, but hers. She never hated noise. She never hated me. She hated my daughter's existence. She hated anything she couldn't control. The officers cuffed her, read her rights, and placed her in the back of the cruiser. She was still screaming as they drove away. When the street finally went quiet, my knees buckled. I leaned against the doorway, my body shaking with adrenaline, anger, and overwhelming relief. Neighbors approached slowly, some apologizing for not stepping in sooner, others expressing guilt for ever believing her lies. One neighbor, the older man, Mr. Jensen, placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. You protected her, he said softly. You did right. I nodded, unable to speak. I went inside, locked the door, and found my daughter curled on her bed, clutching her stuffed fox. When she saw me, she burst into tears and threw her arms around my neck. Daddy, she cried, was she going to hurt you? I didn't lie. She tried, I whispered, but she'll never hurt us again. For the first time in weeks, the house felt safe. Truly safe. Karen was gone. Arrested. Charged. Exposed. And in the weeks that followed, the neighborhood changed. People became kinder, more protective of my daughter. No more violation slips. No more threats. No more stalking. And my daughter, my brave, strong, precious girl, laughed again. That sound, the sound Karen hated most, was the sound that healed everything she tried to destroy. If you made it to the end of this story, then you already know one thing. No parent should ever have to fight this kind of battle alone. And no child, especially one who's already fighting to breathe, should ever be treated the way Karen treated my daughter. If this story touched your heart, if at any moment you felt the fear, the anger, the helplessness, or the relief we felt, then do me one favor. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from so I can see how far our community reaches. And if you believe every child deserves safety, love, and protection, hit that subscribe button right now so stories like this get pushed out to more people who need to hear them. Your support isn't just a click, it's a promise that good people still stand together. Thank you for watching, thank you for caring, and I'll see you in next story. Stay safe, stay strong, and always protect the ones you love.